Now let's talk about what's going on in Niger. There seems to have been another coup in the country. For those of you who may not know, Niger is a landlocked nation in West Africa. It's home to more than 25 million people, and this is the fourth military coup it is facing since it gained independence from the French in the year 1960. The fourth one in about 6 decades. It's the same story playing out in West Africa. The region is notorious for both regular coups and extremist militant insurgencies. And the latest coup in Niger is likely to fuel more instability in the region. Here's a report.
This is the country of Niger, and that's where the capital, Niamey, is located. It's where a coup attempt is underway against President Mohamed Bazoum. Yesterday, he was detained by members of his presidential guard. The presidential palace was then sealed off. But as of this morning, Bazoum was still defiant. He tweeted this at about 10 a.m. He said Niger's hard-won democratic gains will be safeguarded. The country's military, however, seems to have other ideas. Yesterday, after they detained the president, members of the military released this statement.
This day, July 26, 2023, we, the Defense and Security Forces, meeting within the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, CLSP, have decided to put an end to the regime you know. This follows the continuing deterioration of the security situation and poor economic and social governance.
Notice that an armed forces member read out this statement while flanked by 9 troops. It looked like a show of force. At the time, it was uncertain how much of the military was involved. Today, the rest of the country's military leadership has backed the coup. The army's chief of staff said the priority was to avoid destabilizing the country. Yes, the coup backers apparently don't want instability. The armed forces are also shutting down Niger's democracy.
All political party activities are suspended until further notice.
This could have been a response to what transpired yesterday. The president's supporters had taken to the streets.
We are here to defend democracy, we are here to defend the republic, we are here to show our commitment to the rule of law and to say no to any attempt to seize power by force or arms.
The coup plotters had to fire warning shots to drive the crowd away. The military also took control of all roads leading to the national television station. Concerts and movies were broadcast all day, seemingly in an attempt to keep the people calm. Meanwhile, the coup has drawn widespread international condemnation.
The Secretary General is following closely the situation in Niger. He condemns in the strongest terms any efforts to seize power by force and to undermine democratic governance, peace, and stability in Niger. The Secretary General calls on all actors involved to exercise restraint and ensure the protection of constitutional order. The United Nations stands by the government and people of Niger.
The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, have condemned the coup attempt. So has the African Union. The head of the African Union, who is in Russia for a summit, issued this statement from the podium today.
I joined with the African Union and the communique it issued to strongly condemn the events in Niger, recommend the re-establishing of the constitutional order, and demand the immediate release of President Bazoum and his family.
So there's definitely resistance to the coup. But will it matter? Both Niger and the West Africa region as a whole is quite used to military takeovers. This is Niger's 4th coup since it gained independence in 1960. And there have been multiple failed coup attempts in the past. When Bazoum became president, that was the first peaceful democratic transition of power in Niger. Every other presidency has ended with a coup. And like we mentioned, the entire West Africa region is used to armed forces taking control. Look at this list beginning from just 2000. Burkina Faso, 3 coups, 2 of which took place last year. Mali, 3. Guinea, 3. There was a coup in the neighboring Central African nation of Chad in 2021. These countries have suffered 7 coups since 2020. Instability and military impunity are rampant. which is why it's no surprise that militancy thrives in the region. Al-Qaeda, ISIS and Boko Haram all operate in the area. The region's militaries are supposed to be fighting the terrorists, but instead they're too busy toppling elected governments. And all the while, sandwiched between power-hungry troops and religious extremists are West Africa's citizens.
Does America know about aliens? Does it have proof about alien UFOs? And is it hiding that proof? I ask because a sensational claim is making waves. Listen to this.
UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine.
UFOs are real, he says, and no, this is not from a Hollywood film. This happened in the US Congress. This claim was made by a group of lawmakers. They were told that America knows about aliens, although, as you heard, he used a different term, non-human beings, also unidentified aerial phenomena. Trust Americans to be dramatic. They're talking about aliens and UFOs. And who are these speakers? Former members of the US defense establishment. They worked for the Pentagon. Some flew military planes. Others analyzed intelligence. This week, they appeared before American lawmakers from both parties. They're conducting hearings, apparently to find out the truth about aliens. So they've summoned witnesses, and these proceedings have attracted global interest for obvious reasons. We heard the testimonies. They're extraordinary. Take, for example, the testimony of a man called Ryan Graves. He's a former American Navy pilot. He told lawmakers about a training session. No dates were mentioned, but here's how the story goes. 2 F-18 Super Hornets were in the air. They were flying in formation. Suddenly, a UFO appeared. And what happened next? Why don't you hear it from the horse's mouth?
2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base.
He says UAP, that's unidentified anomalous phenomenon, what's more commonly called a UFO, unidentified flying object. So what happened after the pilots returned? Graves told American lawmakers that a safety report was submitted, and that's the last that he heard of it. He doesn't know if any action was taken on that report. But this is just one story. Apparently, there were more encounters and more mysterious events. Our next account is from a man called David Fravor. He's a retired US Navy commander. He too delivered a testimony. Fravor was once flying an F-18 jet, and he noticed something strange.
As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball.
A small white object moving over the water like a ping-pong ball, he says. At the risk of sounding repetitive, let me remind you, this is not from a movie. All these testimonies happen in real life, and we saved the most sensational one for the last. The third witness, his name is David Grush. He's a former intelligence official. He worked in the US Defense Department, that's their defense ministry, and what did he do there? He was on a task force about UFOs, so perhaps he knows better than all the others. And what did Grush say? He said America has had long-standing covert programs. Some date back to the 1930s. And he then went on to talk about aliens. He told lawmakers that the US government has some materials. They are of, quote-unquote, non-human origin, and they were taken from some crash sites. Listen to this.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Right. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Again, this is on-record testimony, and Grush had more to say. He spoke about a reverse engineering program where crashed vehicles were tested. I have that statement with me. Listen to this. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. So he did not see it for himself, but he claims the program did exist. And this is quite a claim. The Pentagon has been quick to rubbish it. They have, in fact, released a rebuttal. Let me quote from it. The Defense Department Task Force does not have any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. In other words, the Pentagon says it does not know anything. But convincing the skeptics will be hard. Aliens and UFOs still sound like a far-fetched idea. And look at the careful choice of words. Non-human doesn't really mean alien. It could even be a plant or a sample of something else maybe. So there is still little tangible evidence except for videos like this one. These are unclassified videos. They were part of a US intelligence report.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly. Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. Nickel 6-1 Tango Logic. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly.
So what are those flying objects? The US government said they do not know. In 2021, they released a report. It said there are no extraterrestrial links to these objects. So there is simply too little information to make a decision. But American lawmakers were not satisfied. They saw this as a cover-up, so they called for these hearings, and it has stirred up the hornet's nest again. Do aliens exist? Honestly, we don't know. And if you ask me, there are far bigger and more urgent questions that we need to answer first. It's been 6 years since the Me Too campaign, 6 tumultuous years. In this time, we have called out sexual harassers. We've unmasked dozens of predators. But how many have we punished? I ask because of the Kevin Spacey trial. The actor has been acquitted by a court in London. He was accused of 9 sexual offences by 4 men. All the cases were in the same period, from 2004 to 2013. But the jury did not convict him. They found him not guilty of all the offences. So Spacey walked out a free man. He says he's humbled by the verdict. Listen to this first.
I imagine that many of you can understand that there's a lot for me to process after what has just happened today. But I would like to say that I'm enormously grateful to the jury for having taken the time to examine all of the evidence and all of the facts carefully before they reach their decision. And I am humbled by the outcome today.
Kevin Spacey had been accused by around 30 men. Not all of them went to court, 30 men. Those that did had multiple allegations of groping, of drugging, and of assault. Spacey denied all of it. He said the accusers were out for money, but he did admit to 2 things. 1, that he was a quote-unquote big flirt, and 2, that he often made, and I'm quoting, often made clumsy passes, whatever that means. The accusers did testify against Spacey, but the jury was unmoved. They declared him innocent. There is already talk of him making a comeback. You see, when the allegations emerged, Kevin Spacey became kryptonite. No one wanted to work with him, but now he's plotting a return to mainstream acting. Johnny Depp did the same after his domestic violence case. So tonight we're asking an important question. Have courts failed the Me Too movement? And Kevin Spacey is just one example of it. American comedian Bill Cosby was accused by 60 women, 60. In 2018, he was convicted and jailed for 10 years. It was seen as a huge moment in the Me Too campaign, but the joy did not last. In 2021, that conviction was overturned. Bill Cosby walked out a free man. Another example is Mario Batali. He's a celebrity chef in the United States. He was charged with sexual assault in 2019, but last year he was acquitted. The situation is no different here in India. The conviction rate in crimes against women is just 26%. 1 out of 4 accused is not convicted. Only 1 is convicted, in fact. If the accused is powerful, he can do a lot. Intimidate his accusers, bribe officials and judges, even slap defamation cases against his victims. This is the unfortunate truth of Me Too cases. They've shaken our collective conscience. They've also exposed the true face of powerful men. But when it reaches court, it's different. Take a look at France. Only 14% of rape allegations led to jail time. Only 14%. Between 2019 and 2020, the number of convictions, in fact, declined. By how much? Almost 31%. What explains this trend? Why do Me Too cases fail in court? There are multiple reasons for that. One major reason is the type of legal system in place. Western countries use a jury system. Ordinary people are constituted into a panel. This panel will decide whether the accused is guilty or not. It may sound like democracy in justice, but not every case is easy to understand or decide on. Some of them are complicated, like Me Too cases, very complicated. Do jurors understand the concept of power disparity or the idea of consent? Maybe some of them do, but we live in a politically charged world. Me Too cases have become legal and political flashpoints. So using juries may not be ideal. The second reason is time. Accusations have emerged or often emerge after years or decades. So evidence is hard to get. In such cases, it becomes a he said, she said situation. The Kevin Spacey case is one such example. As always, the court believed what he said. A third reason is the way our police and courts are designed. They're not sensitive enough. They're not concerned about why this movement emerged. Hence all the acquittals. And let's be clear about one thing. An acquittal does not mean the accusers lied. It does not mean the Me Too movement was a farce. It means our legal systems need an upgrade, and an urgent one at that. Imagine a survivor reading about these repeated acquittals. It could traumatize women who have come out, and it may also scare away women who haven't. So our courts and laws need a reboot. But until then, what can we do? For starters, do not rehabilitate these people. We've seen Me Too accused return to mainstream jobs as actors, as businessmen, as journalists, and as politicians. And this is a dangerous trend. You're putting more women at risk by rehiring these predators. And now let me tell you about IST. For the rest of the world, this refers to Indian Standard Time. But I'll let you in on a little secret. We Indians have a slightly different definition for it. To us, IST is Indian Stretchable Time. For instance, if you're invited to an Indian wedding at 8 p.m., it will probably begin at 10:30 p.m. and I'm being generous with the timing here. It's almost like a mutual understanding. We're all on the same page, much like tardy telepathy. But let me clarify, we aren't the only latecomers. People across the world struggle with being on time. According to a survey, 12% people are late to work at least twice a week. 12%. Running late is the only exercise many people get. Now, American Gen Z is proud to be part of this club, and Gen Z, being Gen Z, even has a word for it. It's called time blindness. It's popping up across the American workforce. People are showing up late to work, then requesting that their time blindness be accommodated. As expected, this has received mixed responses. But before I get to that, what is time blindness? It refers to a skewed sense of understanding time. Time blind people either under or overestimate the time a task will take. To them, time is just an immeasurable chunk. Frankly, it sounds bizarre. Is time blindness even a real thing? Well, here's what the experts say. Time blindness could be a symptom of a mental health issue. Like with people who have ADHD, they can become hyper-focused on an activity and lose track of time. But very few psychologists treat time blindness as a mental condition by itself. They say time blind people should not be given special treatment. I know There goes your chance of using it as an excuse. Time blindness is basically a fancy word for being perpetually late. Points for creativity, sure, but it's kind of like saying that you have phobe. That's the fear of being early, F-O-B-E. It's not a real thing, at least not yet. We made it up. Just an excuse to avoid arriving too early at a party. Fear of being early and losing your street cred. And that's really the reason why people are late to things. So why are they? Why are people late? A Washington University study says being late is genetic. Some studies blame childhood experiences. People often mimic their parents' tardiness or even rebel against overly punctual parents. There is no winning this, right? Science also says that some people are hardwired to be late. They function on autopilot mode. Others like playing crisis maker. Such people need an adrenaline rush to get going. Sometimes lateness is a product of sheer optimism. People underestimate the traffic, for instance, then sleep through every one of their 10 alarms. If time isn't your friend, maybe you can relate to one of these reasons. But for those who are punctual, these are simply excuses with an element of selfishness. For instance, people are late for dinner with friends, but how come they arrive on time for job interviews or flights? It's a fair question. And the time-challenged are likely to face it regularly. After all, our world considers it a moral virtue to be on time. There is a whole industry dedicated to timeliness. According to some reports, it's worth more than $90 billion. It enthusiastically offers analog clocks, digital clocks, alarm clocks, timers, planners, self-help books, articles, even motivational posters, the kind that say, Taylor Swift has the same 24 hours in a day that you do. And people buy into this. They don't just strive to be punctual. They also demand it regularly, especially from their airlines. And this Brazilian airline is the most punctual in the world. It was on time 89% of the times. Haneda Airport in Japan is a proud member of the Efficiency Club. It's the most punctual airport in the world. And for all the jokes that we crack about IST, Kempe Gowda International Airport in India is the second most punctual one. The next three most punctual airports are in the US. But that's not all. We even expect punctuality from our trains. Some countries take it a little too far, though. In 2017, for instance, a Japanese rail company issued an apology because its train left 20 seconds early. It is odd. But as I said, punctuality is seen as a virtue, at least in many societies. Germany, Britain, France, Switzerland, and Japan are meticulously punctual, whereas many Latin cultures and Asian countries like India and China practice flexible time. But even in these countries, latching on to the time blindness trend will not fly. Being fashionably late is hardly ever in fashion, but then again, people just can't help it. Some are born late, some achieve lateness, and others have lateness thrust upon them. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with the United States. A burning crane came crashing down from a high-rise in Manhattan. The crane was carrying 16 tons of concrete. 2 firefighters and at least 9 other people have been injured. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell just experienced the longest 19 seconds of his life. So did everyone else in the room. No, they did not do a plank together. McConnell went abruptly quiet in the middle of a news conference. Everyone was confused. He was then escorted away, and when he came back, he said he was fine. In London, tiger cubs had a fun time in a zoo. They soaked in the sun, chilled on a swing, and called it a day. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1953, the Korean armistice was signed, ending the 3-year-long war. The Korean Civil War began in 1950. The 3-year-long bloody struggle left millions of people dead. The two countries never really signed a peace deal. So they're technically still at war. With that, we call it a wrap. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
this week. It's been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to